Sam Darnold is a Seattle Seahawk, and that was just one move of a crazy day one in NFL free agency. We're breaking it all down on Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's episode, we are recapping a crazy day of NFL free agency. We got quarterback movement. We got a Laremy Tunsil trade to the Commanders. We got a couple of teams out there just doing a ton of different things on day one. Before we dive into it all, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. The Seattle Seahawks make a major change at quarterback.
It's a major change, but changing into the same place, a lateral move?
Very well, maybe. We'll throw it to my guy, Corbin Smith from Locked On Seahawks, to give you the news.
The Seattle Seahawks officially have a new starting quarterback, and it's Sam Darnold. 3 years, $100.5 million with $55 million in guarantees. The breakout Pro Bowl quarterback will be replacing Geno Smith. Darnold was a revelation last season, very similar to Geno Smith in 2022 in Seattle, breaking out with 35 touchdown passes and over 4,300 passing yards, ranking fifth in both categories in the NFL, led the Vikings to a 14-3 record. He's only 27 years old. To bring in a player who still has room to grow and is going to be playing a system under Clint Kubiak that has a lot of similarities to what he played in with Kevin O'Connell last year. Now the Seahawks have to build a supporting cast around him, find receivers to pick up the slack without DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and most notably improve the interior offensive line to give Darnold a chance. If they're able to do that, then this has an opportunity to be a move that maybe gets the Seahawks to the next level, contending in the NFC.
You know, a lot of people, Lauren, are acting like this is some crazy move from the Seahawks. But quite frankly, I see Geno Smith and Sam Darnold as relatively comparable. And Sam Darnold is 7 years younger. So I think from that perspective, either you have an elite quarterback in the NFL or you try to build around a guy in the Sam Darnold, Geno Smith tier and just hope that you can build a roster good enough to where that level of quarterback play can win you a championship. I guess I think that there are worse things to be than building around that level of quarterback. I guess I just don't think that Sam Darnold is the guy you want to do it with.
Yeah, it just feels to me like the key word there is building, right? Like they trade away DK Metcalf, they cut Tyler Lockett. Like the Bucs are clearly trying to sort of reset a little bit here. But your plan is to reset with Sam Darnold as the quarterback who famously needs a really strong supporting cast in Minnesota to get any sort of production out of his career. Like it doesn't make sense to me. Like if you're kind of not tanking a little bit, but if you're breaking things down, why are you spending $30 million a year on Sam Darnold? Wouldn't the plan be go cheap at quarterback and try and get a young guy for the future?
Yeah, I mean, the offseason is far from over. Of course, Seattle could make a ton of different moves that we don't expect and things like that. But it does seem like some sort of crisis of identity of we don't want to absolutely tank and be awful. So we want to make sure we have, you know, at least a mid-level quarterback. But at the same time, you're losing talent. They're adding in the draft, but it's mostly not a great draft class to find stars. So you're really just getting kind of lunch pail guys throughout most of this draft, more meat and potatoes style. I do see it as sort of a crisis of identity of, this would make more sense if they were keeping DK Metcalf around and you were building that way.
And I wonder if this just came down to like Pete Carroll and the Raiders really wanted Geno Smith and the Seahawks said, sure, I guess we'll get more for him than we thought we could. So then Geno's gone and we just got to find a replacement. So, you know, you're not spending, you know, Justin Fields money over there, but you're getting Sam Darnold instead and feeling like, you know, this is a guy who you've seen have that kind of success in the NFL that and the familiarity on offense. Like it makes some sense. It just doesn't quite. We need to see the rest of the moves here before we fully know what the Seahawks are actually doing.
Certainly. And I do agree with you there, you're talking about Geno Smith. Maybe we're hearing reports Geno Smith was maybe the reason that this happened. He wanted to leave Seattle and really wanted to go back and play with Pete Carroll. So maybe it's not a move that, the Seahawks are willingly making. This is their adjustment to something that caught them kind of off guard. So take that into account too. You also mentioned, though, Justin Fields, and that was another big news bomb on Monday. Fields has picked a new home, and I'll throw it to my guy, John Butchko of Locked On Jets, to give you that.
The New York Jets have their quarterback. I'm John, the host of Locked On Jets, and on the first day of free agency in the NFL, the New York Jets have addressed their biggest need, signing quarterback Justin Fields to a 2-year contract worth $40 million. There's been a lot of buzz growing over the last couple of weeks about Fields potentially joining the Jets. It's a match that makes a lot of sense. Fields' career has not gone how he's hoped it would. Struggles through his 3 years in Chicago, a year in Pittsburgh where he was unable to beat out Russell Wilson for the starting job, but still plenty of natural ability. And the Jets need a quarterback. There's probably no quarterback out there with more upside than Fields. The Jets can design an offense around his strengths, including incorporating his ability as a runner. There's no guarantees that this will work, but this was probably the best option in front of the Jets. For more on the Jets, tune into the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. New episodes every Monday through Friday, your team every day.
The Jets just need an exorcism of sorts to just rid themselves of any of the bad energy left. It's funny that Aaron Rodgers is seen as like an energy guy and vibes, sage the room, when really that's what people need to do after he leaves. That's what they need to do to reset things. So I actually like Justin Fields has his faults. He, holds the ball too long, doesn't process quick enough, doesn't attack the middle of the field properly. All of the stuff about Justin Fields more than I ever would from covering him during his rookie contract there with the Bears. But he plays hard. He tries hard. He loves football. He wants to do well. And I think having somebody who's just focused on being a good football player with a little bit of upside, especially with this QB class and the veterans that were available, I don't think it's a bad route for the Jets to go. Just needing to cleanse themselves of the Aaron Rodgers experience.
It just seems wild to me that a guy who the Bears couldn't get more than a 6th-round pick for in a trade a year ago goes to Pittsburgh, has a below-average season, even by standards, and then gets $20 million a year. Like, is he a better quarterback today than he was a year ago? It's funny to me. Like, I do like the fit in New York. I mean, I like that quarterback room with Fields and Tyrod Taylor and Jordan Travis. I think there's some schematic areas you can build on there. You reunite him with his college wide receiver Garrett Wilson. Like, I'm certainly optimistic for Fields to be able to figure things out. I'm surprised that he had such a high market, but I think, like you said, quarterback market, it's supply and demand here. And all of a sudden, last offseason, there was plenty of supply with guys like Kirk Cousins available. Everyone was fighting for other quarterbacks, and Fields slipped under the rest. This time, Fields is one of the better, more intriguing options available.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. And speaking of the quarterback options, the dominoes are starting to fall with Darnold, with Fields, Carr going back. Now we're hearing maybe Russell Wilson. Could he go back to the Steelers? Would he go to the New York Giants? Aaron Rodgers, they're probably fighting over those two spots right now, right? Like, it's Rodgers to Pittsburgh or Wilson back to Pittsburgh. Zach Wilson goes to the Miami Dolphins. So that's a smaller piece off the board. But the quarterback dominoes are starting to fall. Where do the Browns go from here? They trade for Kenny Pickett. Is that an answer to not liking what they saw in the free agent? Kenny Pickett getting a 5th rounder. Somebody please call about Will Levis, man. We'll give you a 6th. Like, come on. If Pickett's getting a 5th, Levis could get a 6th, right? Right? Anyways, I just think the quarterback dance happening. Do the Vikings want a veteran? Who's available? Daniel Jones is a big player here. Like, what do you see shaking out here right now? Is there any clear fit that you see that could still happen?
I don't know about a clear fit, but I think I like what Pittsburgh has done to set up the opportunity for either Wilson or Rodgers to be able to open some things up vertically for them in that offense and try and lock things that way. I don't think either one of those guys is really ideal for New York, because New York's got to get a rookie in there too, and Rodgers has never been the super friendly develop a rookie.
They ain't getting one now, Lauren. The Titans are definitely taking Cam Ward number 1, because who are they going to have at quarterback? Like, there's no choice. The Giants are in a tough spot.
So then, Shedeur Sanders and Russell Wilson, is that the mix you want in the New York media market? Like, that's
interesting.
It feels like they're in a great spot.
Yeah, like the cool guy and then the cornball. It's very interesting, that dynamic there. I personally think that Rodgers is a perfect fit for the Steelers. I've kind of been on this. I was Stafford for them. Then when he was going out, Rodgers for them, especially both DK Metcalf and George Pickens can win vertically with their physicality and their size. Ball placement is key in those scenarios. And Aaron Rodgers has that ball placement where he can put it right on the back shoulder, and those guys can do the box out thing that they do so well and win. Rodgers, I think, is a better player than Russell Wilson right now, personally, that even at his age and being a little older. So really go with the better player, and I think it's Rodgers.
I still want Rodgers in Minnesota just to complete the prophecy. Not because I want to be NFC North, but we just have to follow this whole thing through.
Yeah, I want to enter the Matrix with you on that one. Would be hilarious. But so much happened. Day one of free agency, Laremy Tunsil traded to the Washington Commanders. Today's episode is sponsored by Betterhelp. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session. But with BetterHelp, you could save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and affordable. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it's the world's largest online therapy platform. Look, you got to take care of yourself. You spend money on your gym membership. You like healthy food. You got to make sure that you're taking care of your mental well-being as well. I really like BetterHelp because they can make sure that you get matched with the right therapist for you. And I think that's so important with these sorts of things. Your well-being is worth it. Make sure that you visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL, breaking down a crazy day one of NFL free agency. We talked about the quarterback news with Darnold and Justin Fields picking new teams and where the dominoes could fall from here. But we got a monster trade, and the Washington Commanders continue their busy offseason, this time going after a franchise left tackle. My guy David Harrison from Locked On Commanders broke down the trade.
The Washington Commanders were quiet for much of the early portion of day one of the NFL's open negotiating period, but when they decided to strike, they struck big. I'm David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast, and it's not a free agent move that we're going to talk about here right now. It's a trade. The Washington Commanders sending 4 picks over to the Houston Texans in exchange for 5-time Pro Bowl left tackle Laremy Tunsil and a 4th-round pick in return. Ultimately, the Washington Commanders send 2 draft picks from this year's draft over to the Houston Texans, while reportedly a 4th-rounder from this year's draft will go back to Washington along with Laremy Tunsil. Now, 2 picks next year are also going to go to the Houston Texans, but we're going to let future David, future Adam Peters, future Washington Commanders worry about that for right now. Quarterback Jaden Daniels has a proven Pro Bowl left tackle to protect his blind side. Tunsil is a little bit older, but right now, Trent Williams, 36 years old, about to turn 37, still playing some pretty good ball. So we'll worry about Laremy Tunsil's trajectory 5 or 6 years from now. Right now in 2025, Pro Bowl left tackle joining the Washington Commanders. Big win for general manager Adam Peters. We'll talk about all of it and more on the next episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Listen, this is what I expected the Washington Commanders to do this offseason, and probably the right way to handle things. You go out, you get Deebo Samuel, you got to pay him a little bit, but you didn't give up much, and you add a secondary option that you really needed. You bring back Zach Ertz. They signed Javon Kinlaw for the defensive line. They bring back Bobby Wagner as well. Now you add Laremy Tunsil, and look, again, they gave up quite a bit here, like a 3rd rounder, a 4th rounder. There's a swap in there, But when you have a quarterback on a rookie contract like this, sometimes you just have to push all in. We saw the Houston Texans do it last year as well. And it's funny that now they're the team giving the asset away to the Washington Commanders, who feel like last year's Houston Texans with the rookie quarterback. And he's going to turn into an elite option. We're Super Bowl contenders now, baby. We're going for it. We'll see if it works out. But at the end of the day, I don't fault Washington for doing what they're doing right now and making this move.
Yeah, for all the reasons this makes a lot of sense for Washington, it's all the same reasons why it doesn't make a lot of sense for Houston, because their rookie quarterback is still on a rookie contract. Like, I mean, I think the writing was on the wall when they drafted Blake Fisher from Notre Dame in the 2nd round last year. Like, they've kind of had this like they've got 3 offensive tackles. Somebody's got to go thing building for a little while. So I understand getting rid of the oldest guy and getting probably the biggest draft haul of trading any of those guys. But at the same time, you got to turn around and see some real significant investment in building around CJ Stroud, because that offensive line was such a big problem last year. The optics of worsening the offensive line in this way doesn't sit super well when you don't have that, and it's still early, but that follow-up move yet to see, here's how they're really supporting CJ Stroud. They just had to subtract to then make the additions.
Yeah, look, like the logic of, hey, we're drafting and developing guys. Our oldest guy may be a good player still, but he's worth so much money. We have some replacements that we can put up and maybe allocate those resources in a better way. Like, the theory of that does make sense until you look at the Houston Texans offensive line last year. Like you were saying, the optics of last year, this offense deteriorated because the offensive line couldn't block a soul. You had 4 bad offensive linemen and 1 really, really good one. Well, now you have none. So it's like, okay, Titus Howard is an okay player. Maybe Blake Fisher improves. You should expect that. But they're replacing a lot of stuff on the interior. Kenyon Green was terrible. Shaq Mason gone, released now. Like, maybe they keep Juice Scruggs around as a center. I liked him as a prospect coming out of Penn State. But I guess it's just, instead of reinforcing your weakness that really took your team down a huge level, you got worse at it. And I agree with you. It is very perplexing when you do have CJ Stroud on a rookie contract still.
Yeah, I imagine they're just looking at this and saying, listen, all 5 of these guys in the offensive line were draft picks in the last 5 years. Like, these are all guys they've been drafting and helping, and they're hoping that, coaching can bring these guys up to another level. But that's a lot of faith in a group that didn't really take that step last year. But new OC, new offensive line coach, maybe?
Yeah, maybe it happens. I guess I go back to, this is why a lot of coaches say it's the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's, because you may be the best coach in the world, but going from a Laremy Tunsil to a Blake Fisher, that can make you look like a bad coach pretty quick. But offensive tackles are hard to get. So, I mean, Washington, it's understandable why they made the move that they made. They're going to shift Brandon Coleman inside. And speaking of offensive tackles being hard to get, we saw the first major offensive tackle deal of free agency come off the board on Monday, and it happened to be the team that I cover, the Tennessee Titans, giving Dan Moore 4 years, $82 million. And listen, Lauren, I'm known as a bit of a pessimist in the Titans community, but Dan Moore gave up the most sacks in the NFL last year with 12. Gave up 40 pressures. He's been a below average pass protector for his entire career. The Steelers took 2 first-round offensive tackles in back-to-back years to try to replace him. And then the Titans give him money that's in between Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. He had a great pass rush win rate last year, and everybody clings to that, saying that Russell Wilson and Justin Fields made him look worse. Am I crazy here to be wondering this is why bad teams stay bad and why the Titans are the Tennessee Titans? Or should I be more optimistic about Dan Moore's potential outside of the Russell Wilson, Justin Fields conundrum?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about quarterback play affecting the ability of the relationship with the offensive line, where he hasn't really had a consistent quarterback behind him in any of his 4 years in Pittsburgh. But at the same time, it's really tough to give a player with this many question marks $21 million when, like, 2 days earlier, Ronnie Stanley goes back to the Ravens for $20 million. And you feel like, okay, like, that's a good price for Ronnie Stanley. So Dan Moore should slot in somewhere well underneath that. And when you jump past that, like, I mean, we'll see how the rest of the offensive tackle market turns out here. But, like, that does not, like, Alaric Jackson got 19 from the Rams. Jalen Moore got 15 a year from the Chiefs. Like, I don't think Dan Moore is that, like, a clearly better player than any of those guys.
Yeah, I think Dan Moore should be closer to the Jalen Moore number of 15 million rather than past the Ronnie Stanley and past Lane Johnson. Like, he's getting more per year AAV than Lane Johnson. And I know that with the cap going up as much as it has, that it's a sliding scale. It's not fair to just say that. I recognize that entirely. But compared to some of the other deals, that bad team tax, Lauren, I know that you've seen your team pay it. It happens. And the Titans definitely paid the bad team tax for a guy like Dan Moore, who, again, led the NFL in sacks allowed last year, even with less than ideal quarterback play for the offensive line. But with that being said, a lot of teams made a lot of moves, and they may not be huge moves, but it's a lot of moves, including the Chicago Bears. We're going to get Lauren's take on that right now. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today, an expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back. Guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, football fans, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We've talked about the quarterback movement. We talked about the offensive tackle movement. Now we got to get into some teams that maybe didn't make a ton of big splashes, but you got some big moves and you got a ton of other moves in there as well. And we'll start, Lauren, with your Chicago Bears, who obviously you tie in trading for Joe Thuney, trading for Jonah Jackson. They go out, they make the big signing with Drew Dahlman, the top center on the market. Some other signings peppered in there as well. What do you make of all of the Bears activity on day one?
Yeah, it's two things. One, it's a clear investment in the trenches. They go out and make trades for offensive linemen and sign Drew Dahlman and then put a lot of money in the defensive line as well. But it also kind of follows this theme where it's like ahead of free agency, they got Ben Johnson, his offensive lineman, trade for Jonah Jackson,
Yes.
trade for Joe Thuney. And now it's like, Dennis Allen, it's your turn. Who do you want? Like they're just each coordinator, each side of the ball gets their opportunity with the checkbook to go out and get the big additions that they need. I like that the Bears generally got pretty good value from those guys, all in the 14, 15, $16 million year range, not these $20+ million deals. But I think all of the Bears moves also have some real risk here where Grady Jarrett's a little bit on the older side. Drew Dahlman's had some injuries. Dale Odengbo is kind of still an upside play where if they all work out, it's going to be great. But there's a chance any of them could go wrong. And free agency is always a little bit of a risky venture.
Yeah, it is. But I think what's happening, and I think you would agree, is like you said, Ben Johnson got some of his guys. They're trying to remake the roster in the image of the new coaching staff, and that requires a lot of turnover, and you only have so many draft picks. So if you really want to bring in different scheme fits for players, different styles of players, you don't need a veteran at this skill level. You need a younger guy at this skill level, or vice versa. You know, it's not necessarily that you're changing every part, and every part that you change is getting better. It's just parts that fit what you want. So I think that's happening right now, and you could probably use that as reasoning for the New England Patriots, who made a lot of moves, including a splash move for the top interior defensive lineman, Milton Williams.
The New England Patriots have lived up to Coach Mike Vrabel's hype thus far in free agency, making one of the biggest and most aggressive splashes on negotiation day. I'm Mike DeBate, host of Locked On Patriots, and the Pats have bolstered their defensive front, reportedly signing Philadelphia Eagles defensive tackle Milton Williams to a 4-year, $104 million contract in a move that immediately upgrades the Pats' front seven. And he had a monster year in 2024. 5 sacks, a career high, 40 quarterback pressures. Those 40 pressures were more than Williams had in the previous 2 seasons combined. And of course, he shined the brightest when the spotlight was brightest in the Super Bowl when the Eagles defeated the Chiefs to capture Philadelphia's second Lombardi trophy. If Christian Barmore is able to return to the field in 2025, he and Williams are going to form an elite tandem along that defensive line. But regardless, Williams' presence alone will resurrect the Patriots' defense for this season and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Vrabel went on a spending spree here is basically what happened. He brought in Morgan Moses for 3 for 24, Harold Landry 3 for 43.5, which Oh man, Kiris Tonga for $3 million, defensive lineman. Robert Spillane comes in on a deal. Carlton Davis, 3 years, $60 million. Like, the Patriots are out here making moves, man.
Yeah, I tend to be weary of like teams that end up signing a bunch of free agents, and specifically like free agents in the starting lineup here, because like we were just talking about the Bears, like not all these free agents are going to hit. So if you're counting on 3 or 4 of those guys to be starters, I mean Milton Williams, Harold Landry, Carlton Davis, probably Robert Spillane, and then Morgan Moses. So 6 of those 6 of those guys being starters. If say 2 of those 6 don't pan out, aren't you kind of screwed there? Like that's a lot you're banking on free agents here. That with the risk that inherently, even if you love all those players, like it's a game that we've seen many teams win free agency, and rarely does that translate to winning the next season. Winning free agency is like being smart and targeted in a couple of key moves, not throwing all your cash in the air and attracting all the big names.
Yeah, like the Tennessee Titans, who went and got Calvin Ridley and L'Jarius Sneed, Lloyd Cushenberry, and Kenneth Murray, and Chidobe Awuzie. And dude, it's classic. You win the offseason. You rarely win during the season. Like, people think now, because of what the Commanders did last year, that you could just flip it so quick and be great. And listen, you can go from bad to good in the NFL, but going from bad to great in the NFL is very, very difficult to do and rarely happens. So, like, again, we point back to the Houston Texans. There's an example. But another team that went crazy that does this a lot in the offseason and is typically pretty bad is the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers bring back Tommy Tremble on a $16 million deal. They get edge rusher Patrick Jones for the Minnesota Vikings for a $20 million deal. They bring in Tershawn Wharton on a 3-year, $54 million deal. Gave J.C. Horn a $100 million extension. Trevon Moreg, the safety, $50 million deal. I mean, they, along with paying $100 million for 2 guards last year, the Panthers are just throwing cash at the roster. What are the odds, Lauren? What are the odds that the Panthers are good next year?
Good is a strong jump, but like they were making progress here, and this is a team that with a rookie quarterback like is in a position to spend some of this money, and it's not a lot of household names, so I don't think they're gonna get. They're not going to get the same kind of praise that some of these other big spenders have. But like, I think Tershawn Wharton had a really good season for the Chiefs, and Trayvon Moehrig is kind of an underrated safety in the league. And they obviously tried to spend big on Milton Williams. Like they came out with a plan. They tried to get something done here and had to pivot to some backup options. But I don't hate these moves for them. Like they got to make some moves. These guys are a little bit on the younger side. And they've still got so much work to do that whatever they can chip away at now, I think is a necessary evil for them.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think with the way that Bryce Young played at the end of last season, you owe it to the team and the fans to try to be as good as possible. I think he's good enough to make you a competitive football team. And then once you're a competitive football team, you can see if he's good enough to win you a Super Bowl. And then you can make your decision on whether to move on after the 4 years of his rookie contract or with his 5th-year option ahead. I think that makes a lot of sense. But the moves are going to keep coming. It's not going to stop. It's going to be all the way around the clock for the next couple of days. So make sure that you tune in to the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop. I think the mastermind. Shout out to my guy Tony. Get well soon. Love you, man. The OG. But I think the mastermind is running the afternoon edition right now, as a matter of fact. But make sure you check it out because there's a ton of news, like I said, all the time. But I'll be back with you guys tomorrow. For me, your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, my excellent co-host, Lauren Cox. Thank you so much for tuning in, and stay safe out there.